This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Hello everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today at the Bloomsbury Festival. We have a very exciting session planned for about the next hour. We're going to hear different views of reimagining Bloomsbury streets. And we're going to go straight from talk to talk, speak to speak. We'll give you a few minutes at the end for discussion. I hope you get some ideas from you about the work that you've seen. I'm Martin Austwick. I'm a lecturer at CASA, the Centre for Advanced Spatial Analysis at UCL. We're going to hear from Robert Shepherd, who's an artist who's going to be showing some of the fantastic work he's drawn from Bloomsbury streets. Stephan Hugel will be speaking about his work on mapping Alan Moore's work in Bloomsbury and elsewhere. And Susan Trangmar is an artist and teacher, and she will be talking about some of the literary sides of Bloomsbury. So could you give a little applause to our president?
Yes, this is the Book of Squares. I've been working on it for a few years now, and it's quite dense. And what I want to show to you today, over there, is the 5th chapter, which is called The Thickening. And a river runs through the thickening on each page, and you'll see 5 or 6 layers at each page. And this has taken me since 2008. And I'm happy to begin that now. If I can make the technology work. The first page we have on the left, we have, this is called Russell Square. On the left we have Chuff, is the nickname of the 5th Duke of Bedford. On the right is Political Mentor, which is Charles James Fox, and they faced each other from Bloomsbury Square to Russell Square. And Edgar Allan Poe lived in Russell Square, and Pankhurst lived in Russell Square. And the dauber, Thomas Lawrence, I'm a bit of a dauber. And the blood is, of course, is thicker than water. And this is the original John Russell. And these are my 3 boys. And this page is called Guildford Street. And I have to nip home to feed my 3 boys and then back out in Guildford Street. And Guildford Street is named after Lord North, the Earl of Guildford, who was Prime Minister, but more importantly, he was the President of the Foundling Hospital, which now today is called Colin Phillips. And part of the army, there's a war going on, an imperceptible war, I have to explain this. The Civil War started in 1640, but it's going on today. And I'm part of the square hoppers on the outside of a fortification, and we're fighting the Puritans, John Pym's law, inside the fortification, which runs through Bloomsbury. And now we're in Southampton Row, or Southampton Row, and it's the marriage of Rachel of Southampton to Lord William Russell. And he got his head chopped off, but never mind, he got Bloomsbury for the Russell family because the Southamptons died out. And then we move over to the Wall of Wounds and Sores, which is in Regent Square. And here, the first Doctor Who lived, William Hartnell, who actually was born here. And Edward Irving was here, and he spoke in tongues, and all the fashionable came to Regent Square to listen to him. Then we moved back across the fields, back across John Rock, the Huguenot's beautiful map of 1746. And there in the left-hand corner is the field of the 40 footsteps where 2 brothers fought. And we are blinded by some pepper spray. It's the BT, the British Telecoms, the blinders. And we turn into Broyles by leading the Rhine. And then we've passed quite a long way over to Marchmont Street. And this is Grisel Bailey, who was a Marchmont and a Hume, and she was part of the Scottish Royal House. And she fed her father in his tomb. This is all true. It's no longer there in Marchmont Street, unfortunately. And then I passed down after Marchmont, there she is, in all her glory, and I passed down into Drury Lane, where the lovely Debbie lived, in Mackling Street, which you could call Lucanors, and all the names keep knelling the same grain. That's what the words of the river say. And there I get struck down with an eye problem, get taken off to Moorfields, get an arrow drawn on my eye. This is a true story. So they don't operate on the wrong eye, they draw it on the end. And then I'm cast back into this terrible dogleg called West Central Street, off Museum Street. But on my Walkman, I have the beautiful Bella Bartok playing. And I'm taken into a basement. And anyway, and there's raves going on in the old sorting office, West Central Sorting. And then I moved up to Bedford Square, and I'm astounded by the symmetry of Bedford Square. Bartok's music for strings, percussion, and celeste is perfectly symmetrical. And so is Messi Tom Masaccio, that was his nickname, and he painted the tribute money in the Boccacci Chapel. So I've transposed all these things and mapped them all onto each other to try and make the most beautiful symmetrical thing. Then I get called home, back to Burton. I've gone for a Burton Place. And the river even runs through my house. And there I am in the kitchen. And in the terrible dogleg, I've got covered in oil. I take all my clothes off, I'm going to burn them. And, but I don't. I wrap myself up in kitchen towel. And I think I look like Nijinsky. In the morning, I get called by Jenny the Rod girl, who's in the army too. And she tells me to go to St Andrew's Home and Circus. And I go down there, but I get a massive shock. Where is Albert doffing his cap, the equestrian statue in the middle of the Home and Circus? Been there for 150 years. Gone. But they put it back, they put it just further up the road. But it freaks me out entirely. And then from there, I go up to Rosebery Avenue, and I'm going to hate this Lord Rosebery, Prime Minister. But I kind of grow to admire him the more I find out about him. I hate him because he commissioned Trangmar to be built outside Parliament. But he's a great figure in Finsbury, the borough of Finsbury. And even Ben Tillett, the Dockers leader, likes him and writes great things about him. Then we go over to Bing Place. I love Bing Place because we worship the fig and have magnificent figs in Bing Place and telephone boxes. But in Bing Place, Admiral Byng. Do you know the story of Admiral Byng? Well, anyway, he was shot on his quarterdeck for not attacking the French properly, and Voltaire said he was killed to encourage the others. And Pevsner is associated with Bing Place because there was a big commemoration in the church behind, and there's Coward College. But I've got to move on, because I've got to go down to Charing Cross Road now, and there's Lady Muir, who used to be a tart, but she's now a lady. And she rides around town, this is another true story, in a phaeton drawn by zebras. And that was, where the Dominion is now, was the Muir, I don't know how to say that, Muir Brewery. And then the movement is back homewards, that's my kitchen again. But my commander is called Quadros, and I call him acoustical Quadros. And there is Jane, my wife, lying on the sofa, covered in toys, of course. But I'm not quite home yet. I'm in Cartwright Gardens, which used to be Burton Crescent, but they changed name because of a terrible murder. And she suddenly gets covered in the shelter drawings of Henry Moore. But this is inspired by another whole story I can't go into now, because I've got to go to Tavistock Square in the middle of the night. And here we have a whole sea of Russell names. Everywhere is Russell names. But this is the initiation banquet of the sealed knot. This is our secret society for fighting the people in power, the Puritans, the Parliament. And my commander is going to be Curriculum Veronica Wedgwood, C.V. Wedgwood. And she's the great curator of the Civil War. And then we're in Queen Square. And in the corner of Queen Square is Brunswick Court. And to you, it might be the Imperial's Hotel's service road. To me, I know what it is. It is the line of communication. It is the fortification. It ran right through here. There it is, with the line through the building there. And it comes out the other side, it comes into Russell Square, the back of the Imperial. But we're going the other way. We're going around Great Ormond Street, Lamb's Conduit, to the end. And these are the crimes blowing in from Russell Square, which I want to call Kleist East. This is what the original Russell did. Cut 800 prisoners' throats. And I move out there, back into Bingham Place, because I love it. But into the corner, which is Penn, William Penn, the great Quaker down in Pennsylvania. His house is there. But I meet Ned Ward. Ned Ward is a tramp, but he wrote The London Spy in the 1690s, that I've resurrected him. And we go down Mallet Street, and we hide behind the plink plonk machine, which is back again on the corner of Montague Place. And we hide in a ball of leaves. And Jenny turns up in a Dalek outfit and just spy on us. But she's our friend. And then we move over, and I'm in love with Rachmaninoff's Vespers, only the Soviet recording. And there's a character who sings the fifth part of the Vespers, the Nunc Dimittis. And his name is Konstantin Oknevoy. And so Oknevoy comes off the record and is alive in this part of my story. And he goes around in the dreaming, and he discovers various things that I didn't even know. The down in Kingsway, there was Kingsway Hall, and there is Otto Klemperer conducted the B minor mass. And then Oggy, as they call him, comes back through Cosmo Place, and he's rescued there. People are chasing him, and Josie of Cosmo China helps him out, and he ends up in the Imperial Hotel round the back of the casino. And those statues were at the front of the Imperial, the Great Imperial, and then they're shoved into the back. But this is the line of communication again. And then on we go to, we're still at, there's Shenley in the corner where I was born and brought up. And then I find myself in Gordon Square. And in Gordon Square there's Dr. William's library on the right. And there's a collection of great dissenting pamphlets and things. And I'm with Becky, and we dig up what I call a lovely Rita, an old traffic meter. And we discover Nor, the new Nor, poor Nor. She's got a croix de guerre, she died in Dakar. And then with Dante on my back, painting a flower, of course, well, a bird, of course, we're in St. George's Gardens. And it's the schizo George's Gardens, part Bloomsbury, and part the other George's. And Utopia is there. Utopia is the muse of instrumental music. And Ambrose Heel from Tottenham Court gave Utopia to St. George's Gardens. And so I have Paul Wittgenstein, who had one hand, Utopia's only got one hand, playing the piano on the two. And that is Ludwig's brother. And then we have movements east. We go east with the Intrepid Fox, which came out of the Thane of Wardour Street and went to under the centre point. And we have lots of movements east until we got the movement of the name Mount Pleasant from across the river where it should be. Rather than the map, it's near the Goose where it said Mount Pleasant. It's moved to where the sorting office is. They stole the name. And then we're back in the Brunswick. Poor Caroline of Brunswick. The two queens, the bad queen and the good queen. Caroline never changed underpants, and her husband banished her, and I believe he killed her. And then there's Mecklenburg Street, it's the good queen. And then look at the two squares. You know, look at Mecklenburg Square, it's beautiful. Look at Brunswick Square. Anyway, in the end, we have the bookman who hides in the Brunswick. The Brunswick is in fact Alcatraz, and of course, instead of a birdman, you have a bookman. Hides in the basement. And then we move down to another confusion between Holborn and Holbein. And Holbein did the original John Russell. There he is, the one-eyed henchman, friend of Henry's, the butcher, the man who divided the country up. And I planted him on the chest. There's an ongoing theme of chest in this chapter too. And then we go back to the seat of power of the secret government, which is St Giles Court. But they demolish it, which is quite difficult for me to deal with because I spent weeks putting John Pym in this parliament. But anyway, Renzel Piano solves my problem. He comes along and builds Central St Giles. It's Central St Martin's, well, they've shoved that over there. We've got Central St Giles, which I call Colditz St Giles. This is Flitcroft. And those are the two great suppressions that John Russell did, was the Pilgrimage of Grace and the Prayer Book for Rebellion. They sound quite poetical. Killing all these people was poetical. But Flitcroft not only built that church, but he helped build Woburn Abbey for the Russell Bedfords. And then we're in Bloomsbury Square, back round into Bloomsbury Square. And because Isaac Disraeli lived there, I have Disraeli Gears by the Green. And because they confuse derailleur gears with Disraeli Gears. Crazy musicians. Anyway, then Gertrude Stein, there she is on the right, painted by Picasso. She arrives because she lived in that square. Then we're on the line of communication again, at Long Yard, at Chowbellas, above Chowbellas, Rokeby House, Rokeby Venus. Mary Slasher Richardson comes along, hacks the Rokeby Venus. So the suffragettes are there. Kitty Garner gets shot by Epstein's way. It all happens on these lines, and because this is Las Meninas, anyway, I can't go into the whole of that syndrome because I've got to welcome you to the Doll's Houses, Charles Fitzroy Doll's Houses, the Hotel Russell, the Hotel Imperial, and Dillon's University Bookshop. Three great masterpieces. Only two remain because the Waldorf family knocked down the Imperial because they couldn't get lifts in it in the 1960s. Can you believe that? But and then I've got to move on to Woburn Square. But I'm listening to the great Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, who is German, but she becomes Mrs. Legg. She marries Walter Legg, the head of EMI. And the Warburg is German. There in the square. There it is on the right, on the left, sorry, and on the right. But this was in 1939. It was threatened by the Nazis, and they asked permission to bring it to safety. And they said yes, bring it to London. They put it in 2 ships, put the entire huge collection, and shipped it. And that's where it is, Woburn Square. And oh, by the way, that was Beckett dancing on the right, my little boy. And then we have to go down to Bridges, the first wife of the 4th Earl, and that's a magical place. Just below the E&O, there's this little alleyway named after Catherine Bridges. I love it. And then this is the longest journey of all. I have to go up to Anthill, which is Frank Auerbach paints these 3. You must have seen them all the time. These 3 towers beyond Euston. And then I do a little play, and we walk down Evershot Street, and we ended up back at Herbrand. And Herbrand Russell, the 11th Duke, he got the jitters. And he put up for sale the whole of Covent Garden in 1911 or something like that. One man bought Covent Garden, paid £2 million for it. And Herbrand put the whole lot on white Russian bonds. The revolution happened. Paper. Just paper. 2 million down the drain for Covent Garden. It's had for 300 years. And then the last square is, of course, Russell again. I've come full circle. And it's Rock Bottom by Robert Wyatt. And the great Alfreda Bench draws the cover. And I put all the little pictures of the previous pages back on this page. And then I've tried to cross-pollinate them all. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephan Hugel. I'm a doctoral researcher at CASA, and today I'm going to talk about a project that my colleague and I, Martin, did earlier in the year. It's called Mapping from Hell. So just to give you a little introduction to From Hell, it's a graphic novel published by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell between 1989 and 1996, and it's a fictional account of the circumstances behind the Jack the Ripper murders that occurred in Whitechapel a century earlier in 1888. So to give you a brief outline, in 1888, Prince Albert Victor, Prince Eddie as he's known, one of Queen Victoria's sons, fathers a child and subsequently marries a shop girl named Annie Crook. Victoria finds out about this, and she dispatches the royal surgeon Sir William Gull to clean up the mess, as it were, which he does by damaging Annie Crook's thyroid and committing her to an insane asylum. At this point, both he and Victoria assume that the problem is solved, but as it turns out, a group of Annie Crook's friends, prostitutes, know about the child and the marriage, and they attempt to blackmail one of Prince Eddie's friends, the artist Sir Walter Sickert. He panics and goes to Victoria and explains the problem, whereupon she re-engages Sir William Gull to clean up the mess properly. The background to this is that in the graphic novel, Sir William Gull is both insane and a misogynist, and he has a sort of a grand worldview of a division between the Apollonian and the Dionysian, the rational and the irrational, the male and the female, and he wishes to carry out a ritual which will re-establish male power and secure it for the coming century. And the manner in which he attempts to accomplish this is by carrying out a series of ritual murders. And we find all this out by way of an explanation that he gives to his coachman, John Netley, as he has him drive around London on a mystical journey, as it were, taking in sites of occult significance. Mainly Hawksmoor's churches, and also Cleopatra's Needle. And for our project, I suppose I should give a little background about what we do. Our department is sort of concerned with spatial analysis, and mostly we do quite abstract quantitative work. Mostly we perceive London and other cities on a map or as points. We don't spend a lot of time outside walking around, and both Martin and I are fans of the book, and we thought sort of try to combine both of those things and walk some of the journey. In fact, we hope to walk all of the journey, and while we go, map it using electronic means, which we can later use to represent our own journey. So, just to give you a brief idea of sort of some of the work that we usually do. This is a GPS trace of Swiss bikers in Basel and the journeys that they carry out over the course of the day. So their bikes were tagged with GPS receivers, and you can see them as they go on their way. This was one of the projects that we sort of used as an inspiration for our own work. So we collected the data from our walk in a number of ways. Everyone who came on the walk with us got a little GPS receiver, which they fixed either to their bag or to the outside of their clothing. We took a number of photos on smartphones, which were genotagged the locations in which they were taken. We recorded some audio, we recorded some video. We tweeted to each other and to the wider world while we were on the walk. And we shot some short video using the Vine service. This was purely by coincidence, some graffiti that I saw while we were walking down Columbia Road, which we thought was slightly serendipitous in an awful way. This was a photo that we took when we reached London Fields, which is quoted in the book. So what you're seeing here, as you can see, the red line begins, or it was beginning of joining Brook Street, where certain those households, and walking through Bloomsbury. Some blue flags. Yes. They're heading towards King's Cross. There was a lot of wandering about at King's Cross, and you can see the red line becomes confused as various members of the party sort of wander out. And so, this is close to Belmont Town. This is King's Road. We're going to turn onto here. And at this point we stopped for lunch for about an hour. And you can see the dotted sort of getting dotted as we were all sitting down. And you can see the small spikes shooting off there as the GPS receiver is sort of, there's a little bit of inaccuracy in what they record, so you can see that they're not actually recording a very precise point, but it's rather a smallish radius. Okay, so lunch is over at this point, and we're walking down towards London Fields. The way this was mapped is that everyone's GPS track from the individual receivers was taken and we averaged them to produce a single line, so that you wouldn't can see these wildly divergent lines shooting off everywhere. And we also took all the photos that were taken, and every time our journey with GPS track intersected with one of the photographs in its location, we're changing the location. We didn't really realise until afterwards how well it would have worked, otherwise we would have taken 3 times as many. Because it's quite a nice way of sort of representing a spatio-temporal time, time-based slideshow of where you've been and what you've seen. And we can slow it down and we can speed it up. We did some other multimedia, but unfortunately our PowerPoint's not working, so you can't hear one of our friends recorded quotes from the book at various points where they actually occur. That's pretty much it.
Hello. I'm going to read you a shortened version of a photographic essay which is itself part of a larger project titled A Forest of Science. Sorry, I just need to stop this a second. To follow the dark paths of the mind and enter the past, to visit books, to brush aside their branches and break off some fruit. Wolf, the Waves. In 2009, I began to photograph London plane trees in central London. The urban street tree is a ubiquitous presence, and we're all familiar with those landscape photographs in which the presence of the tree serves as no more than a formal prop in pictorial composition, or as a single decorative specimen on architectural plans in order to fill so-called empty space. However, the street tree serves many different purposes. It can act as marker of place, as register of time passing, or as object of reverie, functioning as part of a matrix of signs and objects within the urban environment. In my photographic project, A Forest of Signs, I've been interested in ways that the street tree acts as both focus and frame for our perception and experience of the city. In so doing, the tree is a key figure in the construction of an urban imaginary. It so happens that the institution in which I work, Central St Martin's College of Art, moved from Charing Cross Road and Southampton Road to King's Cross in September 2011, after over 150 years of history in this part of central London. Perhaps my late act of walking, looking and photographing street trees was unconsciously anticipating this departure. After all, I studied at St Martin's and have spent a large part of my working life traversing these streets. It was while photographing and considering the longevity of urban trees in relation to place that I remembered having read Virginia Woolf's Night and Day many years before, and connected her characters rambling through the streets of central London with my own peripatetic reveries. Rereading Woolf's novels and short stories gave me, amongst other things, an historical perspective on this project. Some of the trees I have passed, scrutinised and photographed may well have been noticed by her. Virginia Woolf's writing is rich with descriptions of London life and lives in the early 20th century, but reading her again, it was the image of the tree shot through the fabric of her writing that I began to notice. Trees for Woolf are a central image, a metaphor for the organic patterning of perception, memory and embodied experience, as witness and companion to the experience of place and as motif for the flux of time and being. So as Woolf would have walked, imagined and wrote, so I have walked, imagined, and photographed. And in a strange way, Woolf's writings concerning trees have come to shadow invisibly my photographs. This abbreviated essay, then, is an oblique dialogue between my urban encounters with trees through the medium of photography and passages from Virginia Woolf's writing concerning processes of looking, imagining, and writing through the figure of the tree. I might have to get this going for me, John. To begin with, how do we see It's Good Walk? Here is Woolf's description of the experience of urban street walking from her essay Street Haunting, a London Adventure, and how we see as we do so. When the door shuts on us, the shell-like covering which our souls are excreted to house themselves, to make for themselves a shape distinct from others, is broken, and there is left of all these wrinkles and roughnesses a central oyster of perceptiveness, an enormous eye. How beautiful a street is in winter. It is at once revealed and obscured, but after all, we are only gliding on the surface. The eye is not a miner, not a diver, not a seeker after buried treasure. It floats us smoothly down the stream, resting, pausing. The brain sleeps as it looks. Vision is shaped by how we participate in the social space of the street. The eye may indeed float us along, but it also darts to and fro, responding to the flux of light and attentive to colour and movement in the field of vision. Our individual pace, passing pedestrians, the weather or time of day, each determine our rhythm of movement. If as pedestrian we decide to pause and photograph on the street, then purposeful observation breaks up the flow. The fluidity of the travelling eye is arrested as an image is framed through the camera, and the glancing moment comes to be formalised as visual composition. The act of framing a scene or object through photography introduces a break, separating that which lies inside the frame from that which lies outside. The resulting image is always a fragment in relation to other fragments which are themselves open-ended. Bernard, in The Waves, watches the mirror reflection of the hairdresser as his hair is cut, and he meditates upon those of his generation cut down by another kind of cold steel. Withered and how soon forgotten. Upon which I saw an expression in the tail of the eye of the hairdresser, as if something interested him in the street. From one eye to another, Bernard's noticing the distracted glance of the hairdresser onto the street outside, beyond his view, brings him back from a melancholy brooding upon death to the prosaic and inevitable change in everyday life. Tuesday follows Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, each spreads the same ripple. The being grows rings like a tree leaves fall. Architecture frames the city in many different ways. The glass walls lining contemporary city streets, for example, allow us to look behind us at the way we might have come. In the mirrored reflection, we catch sight of the street from an oblique perspective, in a way which our everyday visual habits overlook. What we see is linked to the time of day, for the city has its routines of inhabitation. Early in the morning, at night, till the weekend, is the time of the dispossessed, street dwellers, and the army of workers that maintain the city streets. Recording the reflected image, the camera sees what we might otherwise not see, and we see the trees, themselves witnesses to the unseen of the city. The street tree mediates between the passage of traffic and the buildings which line the street. On the threshold between entrance to internal space and exposure to public space, the street tree shares this intermediate space with pedestrians. Such trees may exceed our lifetime and can also outlive buildings so readily demolished through property speculation. Their existence may then draw attention to a dysfunctional architectural relic or pattern of streets now vanished. The presence of such trees, often overlooked, stands between the abandoned architectural site and the meaningful social space, calling attention to the forgotten in our collective experience. In her essay, The Docks of London, Woolf writes, "When suddenly, after acres and acres of this desolation, one floats past an old stone house standing in a real field with real trees growing in clumps, the sight is disconcerting. Can it be possible that there is earth, that there were once fields and crops beneath this desolation and disorder? Trees and fields seem to survive incongruously, like a sample of another civilization among the wallpaper factories and soap factories that has stamped out old lawns and terraces. As living things, trees are registers of seasonal and climate change, responsive to light, wind, and temperature. They are marked by perpetual rubbing, abrading, and scoring by people, objects, the elements. This attention to elemental weathering and materiality as a measure of time features strongly in Woolf's writing, as here from Jacob's Room. The sun had already blistered the paint on the backs of the green chairs in Hyde Park, peeled the bark off the plane trees, and turned the earth to powder and to smooth yellow pebbles. Hyde Park was encircled incessantly by turning wheels. Here, human progress continually circles around itself, not moving forwards, but echoing the turning of the seasons and the seasonal shedding of the plane tree. Incessant movement, ceaseless change. The common life on the street is a perpetual process of passing bodies, connecting gazes, crossings, recognitions, and equally non-engagement, non-recognition, what Woolf calls the common life. We pass along the street, fleetingly present, we do not endure. To linger for a while, to observe and listen, allows a mingling of interior to exterior in our sense experience of urban life. If we do this, we also become aware that there are times on the street when a sudden hush descends, or the streets are emptied of human presence and the world is suddenly acutely visible as existing beyond us, without us. Jacob's Room. Listless is the air in an empty room, just swelling the curtain. The flowers in the jar shift. One fibre in the wicker armchair creaks, though no one sits there. Pickford's van swung down the street. The omnibuses were locked at Moody's corner, and then suddenly all the leaves seemed to raise themselves. "Jacob, Jacob," cried Bonamy, standing by the window. The leaves sank down again. Woolf most poignantly evokes absence in Jacob's Room through the slight movements of inanimate objects in an empty room, in contrast to the busyness of the street outside. The leaves of the trees suddenly rise, as if enacting a last breath, upon which the name of the departed floats, suspended. Time is held in the balance before the leaves sink down once more. The singular nature of the street tree seems to arise from the paradox that its organic vitality is nevertheless rooted to the spot. It exists as an entity planted in a landscape of our making, and like us, it lives and changes. But the tree draws from and expands into the space around it, whilst remaining relatively immobile. This grounded constancy gives the tree an autonomy in which it seems to stand apart, oblivious to our transient existence. To the lighthouse. In spring, the garden urns, casually filled with wind-blown plants, were gay as ever. Violets came, and daffodils. But the stillness and the brightness of the day were as strange as the chaos and tumult of night, with the trees standing there, and the flowers standing there, looking before them, looking up, yet beholding nothing, eyeless, and so terrible. Not only are the trees blind to our being, they will go on after we are gone. Woolf evokes the figure of the tree as a motif of metaphysical inquiry elsewhere, pursuing this meditation not only upon the possibility of a world indifferent to us, but also one existing without our consciousness of it. In the years, she writes, she had been thinking, am I that or am I this? Are we one or are we separate? Something of the kind. Then what about trees and colours? She said, turning around. Trees and colours? Sarah repeated. Would there be trees if we didn't see them? Said Maggie. What's I? Many of Wood's characters are themselves urban dwellers, often in movement, filtering their thoughts and feelings through an immersed experience of the city. A particular place may be intimately tied to a thought in passing, leading to a constitution of self which is open to the transience of the elements. A self which is itself elemental and metamorphosing, chrysalis-like. The waves. Then he got up and went. We all got up. We all went. But I, pausing, looked at the tree. And as I looked in autumn at the fiery and yellow branches, some sediment formed. I formed a drop flower. I fell. That is, from some completed experience I had emerged. The porous boundary between the human and non-human elements and the wandering patterns of an organic mind, ceaselessly seeking order out of chaos through language, are further elaborated through the tree as metaphor for the self. She writes, the mind grows rings, the identity becomes robust, pain is absorbed in growth. Trees may figure as images of inner revitalization, but for Sally in the years, the sudden opening of the shutter of her eye to reveal the external otherness of trees shocks her out of her reverie. Where did thought begin? In the feet? She asked. She closed her eyes. Then against her will, something in her hardened. It was impossible to act thought. She became something. A root lying sunk in the earth. Veins seemed to thread the cold mass. The tree put forth branches. The branches had leaves. The sun shines through the leaves, she said, waggling her finger. She opened her eyes in order to verify the sun on the leaves and saw the actual tree standing out there in the garden. Far from being dappled with sunlight, it had no leaves. She felt for a moment as if she had been contradicted, for the tree was black, dead black. At other times, the tree is brought into play to evoke psychic and physical disintegration. In Mrs. Dalloway, Septimus's shell-shocked derangement leads to a breakdown of boundaries between the self and the world. But they beckoned, leaves were alive, trees were alive, and the leaves being connected by millions of fibres with his own body there on the seat fanned it up and down. When the branch stretched, he too made that statement. In the mark on the wall, the material distinction between trees and men and women fully dissolves in a descending reverie upon the afterlife. But after life, the slow pulling down of the thick green stalks so that the cup of the flower, as it turns over, deluges one with purple and red light. Why, after all, should one not be born there, as one is born here, helpless, speechless, unable to focus one's eyesight, groping at the roots of the grass at the toes of the giants? As for saying which are trees, and which are men and women, or whether there are such things, that one won't be in a condition to do for 50 years or so. There will be nothing but spaces of light and dark, intersected by thick stalks, and rather higher up perhaps, rose-shaped blocks of an indistinct colour, dim pinks and blues, which will, as time goes on, become more definite, become, I don't know what. The threat of formlessness and disintegration is both articulated and resolved through the act of writing or photographing. And once more, the image of trees play a vital part in making sense of experience which threatens to overwhelm. It's the effort and the struggle. It is the perpetual warfare. It is the shattering and piecing together. This is the daily battle. Defeat or victory, the absorbing pursuit. The trees scattered, put on order. The thick green of the leaves thinned itself to a dancing light. I netted them under with a sudden phrase. I retrieved them from formlessness with words. Towards the end of the waves, Wolf writes, "A weight has dropped into the night," said Rhoda, dragging it down. "Every tree is big with a shadow, which is not the shadow of the tree behind it." One might read this enigmatic statement as a felt weight in darkness which falls like a pall over the present. But I would suggest that in these words Wolf summons up a shadow cast by a tree which falls not from behind, but emanates from the future, foreshadowing the present. Just as Wolf's writings from the past have come to shadow my activity of photographing trees, so these same trees of central London for Wolf would have represented a living present which contained implicitly within them a future. Photographing or writing of trees within this city, which is changing as we change, establishes a multiplicity of connections, of possible pasts and futures within the common life. To do so establishes a way of dwelling in the city in which it figures us as we figure it, and in which the project of photographing trees in public spaces inscribes the elusive private dream within the common collective dream as a forest of science. To the lighthouse. And all the lives we ever lived, and all the lives to be, are full of trees and changing leaves.
To all of our speakers, in fact. We have time for one or two brief questions and discussion points, but if you want to quiz them further, they will be around, milling around in the foyer, searching for coffee afterwards to try and answer them a little bit more. Do you have any questions now? Yes, straight to the front.
What do you think about this new naming of St Giles and surrounding area into Midtown?
I haven't actually gone there into that dimension yet. I'm still getting my head around Central St Giles, which is her old college really. I think it's Central St Martin's has left and this new development. What is Midtown?
It's horrible.
Does
You
it?
have such wonderful words like St Giles and it's an estate agent terminology I've noticed popping up in my area, and it's got Midtown.
Because it was the Rookery.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd bring that back. As a term. Call it St Giles Rookery. I know it's got none of the, poverty.
The experts NoHo swear as well. That's the
Well, NoHo, yes, that was pretty dreadful, wasn't it? Soho and NoHo.
Oh, yes, right.
That was, my dad was in the Middlesex Hospital. That's become NoHo. I mean, he trained there. His father trained there. There's, Middlesex is gone.
It included a very brief period when it wasn't a hospital, but it wasn't the abnormal being the basis for the high rich funds.
Is it from New York, do you think?
Yes, this is some sort of state Giles and trying to see the police. Just like tool and try to ignore it.
What were you saying about the battle between two sides, the Americans and the Cavaliers, what's still going on now?
Well, it's the idea that But what happened then in the 1640s when the Civil War was a kind of crucial moment in our history, and it hasn't really been, I'm sort of suggesting it hasn't really been resolved, and I'm fictionalising a kind of battle, an imperceptible battle. There's no guns, any of that stuff. It's fought with signs and music and other things. But it's about purity and something else. It's about Protestantism. And it's like we've always been at war with these other forces. We've imposed this thing before then. Henry VIII imposed Protestantism, or even before then. But I think it's an interesting debate between, a dialectic between different things.
Who are the key generals of soldiers in this most recent?
Well, in my fiction, I'm transferring from Quadros, who was a man I met in St Mungo's. You know where the oasis is? There's a St Mungo's doss house sort of thing. I was working in there, and I met a guy who always put on lots of clothes. And then it turns out there was, in the rookery, there was a guy called Simon Eady, who wore loads of clothes and he had lots of books, and people used to go to him. So my Quadros is a new Simon Eady, and there's I've resurrected people like a great character called Roger Lestrange, who went into Newgate 3 times, managed to avoid having his head chopped off. And he ended up translating Aesop's fables into English. But he was a character around the area. He was sort of between the Civil War and the revolution of William coming over 1680. So he was around. He was in favour and out of favour, slung into prison. Anyway, I've got him, and I called him Dodge, Roger the Dodge. And there's Montrose, who was the great Scottish leader, the sort of cavaliers, and he fought the Campbells. And I like him, and he goes over the mountains. But my Scotland's in King's Cross, so they kind of let me road. Instead of we go over Hillview, we isn't the hill at all. Anyway, it's a bit playful, but I'm trying to make a point in a playful way.
I shouldn't ask me about technicalities, I can't even switch it off.
Your images are seamless. So, the way you indicate change,
Yes.
sort of almost, well, as if the sun was just punched shadows, just this kind of continues. How long has it taken to edit, construct, achieve this kind of articulacy?
Well, this is just one version of the work. It's just an edited extract of the work, which is in different forms. There are single photographs. There's the original keynote presentation, which is how you achieve the blending, the movement. Then there's the cryptime, and then there are some larger scale photographs, which are actually extracts from the moment of disintegration and transition. So, I started photographing in 2008, and I've got many more photographs than you see here. It's just for this, getting a dialogue between certain texts of Virginia Woolf's and certain images, getting there to be a kind of oblique dialogue between the two things. So, since 2008, there's different versions that I've worked on.
Do you know where the London planes come from and why they're so many of them in London?
It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid, which is very common around the world because it's so tough. And it was introduced during the Industrial Revolution, precisely for that reason, because it sloughs off the box, sloughs off the pollution. But it was also used at the same time as the central London was being laid out. The new parks and squares were being laid out. So it was a hybrid implement. It's not, I think it's sometime about 1650 it arrived.
Some people think it's Transcott. The museum, that whole kind of thing. Those people first introduced it.
It's kind of,
It's American and Turkish or something. Fusion of these two types of trees.
But
Is it a sycamore? Is it?
It is a form of sycamore.
Form of sycamore.
Very tough. If you see them digging up the street, the plane is still sycamore. So it's very common, which is what I like.
None of them died of old age yet. None of them died of old age.
Not yet. What's in Berkeley Square, the oldest.
How was this?
They're about 280.
Somebody's illness and
There is.
Well, I think we meant to close at that point. As I say, our speakers will be milling around in the foyer, so if you've got more questions, and I think we should give them all a round of applause and thank you.